What's up, everybody? Welcome to the pre-stream. Normally, I'm running around like a madman before these streams in order to get everything ready in time. But some days I finish up work early, walk the dogs, grab dinner. So sometimes I get to be here a little early and everything's set up. So pre-stream it is because I'm so eager to get to talk to all of you. Now, one thing that I switched around a little bit for this stream because I'm probably going to be using my whiteboard. And so when I'm using my whiteboard, which is right down in front of me, of course, having the microphone down low gets in my way of my pen hand and all that other stuff. So for this stream, I know it's a little bit, kind of visually awkward, but I'm going to have the microphone up and out of the way. So hopefully the sound and the volume is quite all right. So anyways, pre-stream beats. How is everybody doing? It's been a long week. We had a Tuesday, of course. We had a fun little demo stream with our patrons as me and Bob and Smith got kind of tried to experiment and set up for what we might do for our streams for the next couple of Tuesdays while we're still getting everything set up in Exile so that we can start basically live streaming from Aaron's basement. Of course, Aaron's basement not set up for streaming like the studio was. And so there's a lot of work that needs to go into it. But I'm trying not to overdo it. Anyway, so we're going to play some EverQuest. Bob has never played an MMO. And so it'll be really fun to see him not only to play an MMO, but to play, one that is as old as EverQuest is, which again, I think will be a fun treat. Let's see who we got here. Sims3 Snowflake says, what a treat. Pre-sesh Hype from London. Mark T, hello. Mark, was this, how do we do today? What's up, Jackal? Speaking of EverQuest, Jackal was giving Bob some plate armor and some better gear before we got into it. Mark says it was not good. I gotta figure out where to put this thing so it doesn't block my view. All right. I'm glad you addressed that we're all going to write scathing comments about the visual imbalance. Yes, the visual imbalance it does bother me. I'm not even gonna lie, it bothers me. But sometimes we have to make sacrifices so that we can, do the better thing. And in this case, it's about the whiteboard, right? It's about the content, not about the look. It's about the content. Marcus says that they had an awesome RPG session yesterday. Well, that's awesome, Marcus. What game system were you playing? Sims is very interested in what you think makes a good GM. Caveat that this is just, sort of, well, number one, obviously I've been doing this for a long time, 30 plus years. So some of it is definitely, me, but a lot of this is just a synthesis. I mean, some of these things we've probably talked about on other streams before. So a lot of this is just a synthesis of 3 decades of, dungeon master guides and GM advice and blogs and Dragon Magazine articles and, sort of kind of all synthesized into one. So we'll see. And again, as with always, I'm not trying to give you some sort of prescriptive list that you can then go, I'm not a professor. I'm not a lecturer. I'm not going to tell you what is and isn't right for you. What I do want to do is encourage a conversation so we can learn from each other. And then secondarily to that, if I can get you to even just think about these issues or think about some of these concepts, then I will have done my task and what I'm trying to do here. Oh, teaching a GM workshop later this month. Well, Jordan, you have my full and express permission to copy, steal, beg, borrow, whatever you want from this stream. Hopefully it's helpful for you. You need my title should have been How D&D Destroys Game Masters this week on Knights of Last Call. Tormenta 20. It's the Brazilian D&D /fantasy D20. Very interesting. Okay. Very cool. What's up, D? Good to see you. So yeah, hanging out here in the pre-stream. You know, I had a funny. This is going to be funny. I mean, I'm not going to put a poll up or anything like that. But the other day we were talking something about characters, or I think I was talking about being a player with the patrons. And by the way, as we're sitting here in the pre-stream, I will hype up our Patreon a little bit. Knights of Last Call has a Patreon. That's the best way to support us. It's also the most selfish way to support us because you get a lot of benefit out of being a member of the Patreon. I love tips and super chats, and I would happily encourage you to drop either of those today. I think that'd be awesome and amazing, and would love to get your support that way. But if you join the Patreon, then you get exclusive access to our Discord. You get exclusive access to our Patreon-only streams. You get our backlog of PDFs and streams that we've produced, depending on what level you go in. You get access to tickets, which you can use to get Knights of Last Call merch, or even potentially play games with me or Bob. And not to mention access to our entire amazing community, which is very, very different than a lot of RPG communities that exist out there. This is a very heterogeneous bunch with a lot of different opinions, playing a lot of different types of games. Most people are game masters. A lot of people are running games and playing games. So it's a very unique environment to find yourself in to play games. And I think for a lot of people, it's worth the, $5 or $10 a month just to get access to that part. If you support us too, that's cool too. But yeah. So anyways, I was thinking about this, and I just want to see what people say in chat about characters or character classes that I've played over the years. Now, I'm pretty much been a forever GM for most of my life. Most of the time that I have been a player, it has been with Aaron, aka Smith, as my game master. But I'm curious if you can guess which, over the course of 30 years of playing, which class, and this is kind of a trick question a little bit, but not really, but which class do you think I have played the most? So I'm just curious to see what's in chat. You know what? Wait. Maybe I can do a poll here, actually. All right, hold on a sec here. How many options will this give me? All right, so let's see. Okay, I see somebody said cleric, somebody said paladin, wizards. All right, poll in chat. All right, so which class do you think I have played the most over my 30 years of playing the game? Bob, yeah. So those are for you don't know. Now we didn't produce many, so I'm not trying to say like we had some sort of exclusive right to it. But Knights of Last Call did produce a couple of issues of our own zine, which we called Battle Cry Magazine, and it was Battle Cry even with the exclamation point. And we did this. I think issue 1 got released. I think 2021. So this was like, or maybe 2022. It was like 2 or 3 years ago. And of course, the new Pathfinder 2 playtest book, or the new Pathfinder 2 book, which is coming out next year, is called Battle Cry with an exclamation point. So Bob is saying that maybe we have to give up our name to the thing. Well, Michael, that's very nice of you to say. I'm happy to have you here, and you know what? Things are going better. I've been super busy at work. I know Smith's been super busy at work as well. I just had a big presentation this week. It was yesterday. So it was really nice to get that off of my back. Just been working on that and trying to basically learn an entire new ecosystem over the last couple of weeks, while also still meeting all my other deliverables for my existing clients. So that was been kind of stressful. And of course, we moved out of the studio, which was a huge deal. A lot of physical labor, but also just a lot of stress and some emotional bugaboos. And then my mom had to go in for surgery. She had to have a mass removed from her lung. So, you know, I was the one who took her down and hung out with her all day while she was in surgery and in and out and for recovery and taking her back to her follow-up. So that was all in the past. So hopefully going forward, the future, you know, everything seems to be going in the right direction. So we'll see. All right. Wow. The poll is pretty split here. Now, Karima, you are 100% correct. And I would absolutely love to do that. I think that was so fun. But you know, the real question is, Karima, is like, what do we do now? You know, when we originally released Battlecry, 90% of the Knights of the Last Call patrons were playing Pathfinder 2 regularly. And now, I don't know what that's probably down to more like 30%, maybe even less. And so it's kind of tough for me now to sort of understand, like, what kind of content should we even release? Because we are so much more, you know, spread out in terms of what we like. Yeah, you know, it's tough. My dad has been in and out of the hospital a couple of times over the last couple of years. With some heart and lung issues, you know, didn't necessarily take the best care of himself, you know, in his 20s and 30s and 40s. But, you know, as my parents get up there in their 60s and get up into the 70s, you know, and this shit just happens. It sucks. All right. So I'm going to end the poll here because we're about to go live. So 33% of you said Paladin. 25% of you said wizard, 20% said cleric, 20% said rogue. All right, well, if you said rogue, you were dead wrong. In fact, if you watch this stream, I frequently talk about how I hate playing rogues. It's actually my least favorite class in the entire game. So there is that. Cleric is not a class actually that I have played that many times. However, my last Pathfinder, or my last character that I played was in Smith's Pathfinder 2 campaign, called The Dark of Winter, and I played a halfling cleric, free archetype druid, I believe. So I did play a cleric, and I do have fun with that. It's a very support-heavy role, although I don't necessarily love the way that the cleric functions in just most D20 games, because you kind of just turn into a heal bot. No, now wizard is that is probably, if you were to ask myself what's my favorite class, it would be the wizard. However, the correct answer is, with number one vote, Paladin. I have played between 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 4th edition. I have played more Paladins than I think any other class. And now I said it's a trick question because sometimes it was like, you know, a Paladin dual classed with a sword, you know, with a summoner, or it was like a fighter, or, you know, but dual classing into a champion from Pathfinder 2. And so, you know, there's sometimes it's more of a splash here and there. But no, I just, and what's up, Rich? Rich didn't know the initial question. I just picked my favorite out of those classes. Oh, well, you came in a little late, so that's all right. That's all right. Good to have you here, buddy. So yeah, but I played a lot of Paladins. In fact, if you really look at it, like, I've played a lot of Paladins. I have played a good number of wizards, but I played a lot of Paladins. I played a lot of summoners. I've played a couple bards. I played a lot of charisma heavy classes. But I just think the Paladin is such a fun class in the older versions of the game because, you know, for me, number one, growing up, like, Paladins were like superheroes. No one could qualify for them unless you're cheating or you got really, really, really lucky. But then, you know, they were like a warrior, and you got to be the cool protagonist character, but you had, you know, cool special powers and special abilities, and they were so fun to use in dungeons. You know, when you could detect evil and at will, that felt like such a cool ability. And of course, obviously, like, you know, 3rd edition Pathfinder 1, where they could add their charisma bonus to damn near everything, was broken. But I just always thought they were a really fun class. I like having a lot of things available to me. I can go smite and do a bunch of damage, or I can go lay on hands, or remove disease if I want to be in a more supportive role. So I really, really like that. A lot of fun. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started here officially. So let me turn this off here.
And let's get ready.
We got to do it.
RPG.
RPG! RPG! RPG!
Welcome.
RPG! RPG!
So, yeah, welcome everybody to tonight's live stream. We are going to be talking about game mastering. Yeah, that's right. This, of course, is a Thursday stream, so we throw this out to our patrons. They suggest topics, they vote on them, and then I try to do my best to make it this a reality. And today's stream comes to us from Lollipop Candy, who wanted to know about GMing skill sets and what do I think about GMing skill sets. So it should come to no surprise. We've got our trusty stylus ready. We are going to be doing some whiteboarding today, which is why the microphone is in this kind of unique position, even if it blocks my face a little bit. I know, so beautiful. But it's because it gives me easier access to my whiteboard, my Wacom tablet, which I use in order to whiteboard. So yeah, we're definitely going to be doing some whiteboarding tonight. And again, as I was saying in the pre-stream show, this is really more about the conversation. I hope you can come away with something useful from this, but feel free to let me know and your questions. We can have a conversation. If you want to support us, you can do so through our super chat, or you could use the tip functionality. There's a link in the description below. Also, you can type !tip if you just want to support the Knights that way. We'd love to do it because, of course, this channel does not cover the big news and the big drama. So we rely on our patrons and we rely on support from viewers like you in order to just to even keep this going and keep this afloat. So thank you so much for all of that. And by the way, we're only like 8 or 9 subs away from, I think, 12,000 subs. So if you haven't subbed, go ahead and click the sub button just so we can get to 12K. That'd be fun. Yes, Grim. I played a lot of Paladins in 3.5 and PF1 because they were very, very powerful. And I don't think, I'm not a believer in the storm. The Stormwind fallacy I think is real. Like, you can have a powerful character and still make them cool. Like just because you build a powerful character doesn't mean you're not a role, you're not a role player or whatever, that your character has to suck in terms of like having a personality or having unique traits. So I like having my cake and eating it too. Can't I have an interesting character who also is mechanically powerful and strong? Love it. That's my favorite. Right. Like and subscribe. All right. So let's get dangerous. All right. So we just voted on this afternoon. So I had to quickly write down some notes, which I took here. So what I want to do today is kind of break down, and again, we'll see how far we get. Hopefully we keep this going live. But for me, I want to highlight 6, I'll call them broad skill groups or broad skill areas where I think GMs have to be constantly improving, and where most of us probably have areas where we could improve. And it's not necessarily in a strict order, but I do think that there's kind of an order to this. So we're going to start off, before we get into everything, I'm going to write down, just so we're kind of clearly know what we're working with. So these are the 6 main skill areas. All right. Okay, so number 1 is communication. And again, we're going to go into detail about each of these. And while I said that there was no strict order, I will say that I think communication is number 1. I think far more so than any other thing that we're going to talk about tonight, being able to do clear and effective communication is absolutely vital for every element of game mastering, whether it's describing scenes and conveying an NPC, but also, explaining the rules and talking to your players and making sure that you're understanding them and that they're understanding you, for everything from scheduling the session to, hey, I felt like my character kind of sucks, or I'm feeling a little self-conscious about, my character in the story, or I feel like I'm being, ignored. Those are all part of the GM's job. And I've kind of joked before that a lot of GMing really is just psychotherapy. And so the GM kind of sometimes has to step into these roles. But I think the most important thing to realize about game mastering, tabletop role-playing games anyways, is that fundamentally it's a conversation, right? Everything that we do in these games is a conversation. Yeah, VTTs have gotten pretty fancy and snazzy, and now we have particle effects and swirling auras and live fog of war in our Foundry or Roll20. So that's kind of a new thing, a new development, admittedly. But by and large, this hobby is still basically a conversation between you and the players. Your ability to communicate is everything, because you are the world. You are its people, and you also are your players' eyes and ears and nose and right and sense of touch. Everything that they get comes through communication. So communication is number one. Now, number two, actually, I'm going to put number one here. So number two is, and this is going to sound kind of controversial because of how I like to talk about game, but we'll get into this, is prep and organization. And again, we'll get more into these as we go in, but needless to say, being prepared for your game session, understanding the rules, having everything organized, having all the ducks in a row is, I think, a very important skill to have in order for things to run smoothly. A lot of times I think GMing comes down to less doing the good things and more just getting the bad things out of the way, right? When you look back at some of your sessions, which have gone really, let's call it what it is, when they went shitty, it's usually because of like a big roadblock or a big blocker that got in the way. We've talked before on this stream about net promoter score, right? And we say, people rate you on a customer service from 1 to 5. And, you shouldn't feel like you have to chase after 5s. Just avoid the 1s, because these games are so inherently fun, and hopefully most of the people are there to engage and have fun. So what you really want to do is just get rid of the blockers, okay? But on the same token, number 3 is improvisation. All right, or improvisation. Being able to do improv, and that doesn't necessarily mean being able to, all right, let me get a name from the audience. Okay, and what is he doing? I don't mean performing improv, but I do mean thinking on your feet. And I do mean being able to adapt to the players. That is so critical, because to me, fundamentally, what makes role-playing games super interesting is that everything isn't pre-prepared and everything isn't pre-arranged or pre-written down or carved in stone. The ability for you as a game master to be, to leap around and be able to, adapt. So, I say improvisation, but, it's really your ability to adapt. And this can mean improvisation on a tactical level, like during a game session, but it can also mean throughout the course of the campaign. Maybe things go in a different direction and than you ever expected them to, and maybe the players are engaging with a new area or a different thing, and you need to be able to adapt to that. If we're talking Legend of the Five Rings, right? You got to think your water ring. We're going super deep with the insider information here. Okay. So that's number 2 and number 3. Okay. So number 4 and number 5 also going to be kind of on the, so communication, that's tier 1. Okay. Prep and organization, improvisation, adaptation, that's tier 2. Okay. So let's go to tier 3. Now, adjudication. And, this you need to know when to hold them and when to fold them. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. Anybody who tells you otherwise, they're lying. I mean, the fact of the matter is no role-playing game system will be able to support or manage or handle every situation, and making judgment calls about when the rules do and don't apply, and more importantly, how to use the existing rule set to create a ruling which both not only makes sense in the fiction of your game, but also feels like it belongs in the game system is an important skill. Because eventually your players are going to throw you a curveball. And you have two choices, really, at that point. You could say, nope, not in the rules. That's not what that does. And that's, I think, a mistake. I mean, I think there's value. At the same time, I will say this. I am not a huge, well, okay, I'm a rule of cool, I'm that rule of cool fan, okay? Look at that avatar picture. But what I'm not a real big fan of is actually the concept that most people use for rule of cool. I don't like that. I actually don't like that. So what I like is, the rule of, this is the thing that fucking makes sense. You know, the rule of the fiction. If we are in a situation where we're playing in this game, and we're not playing a board game, we're very clear about that. Role-playing games can sometimes look like board games, but they are fundamentally not supposed to be board games. And that means that when we get into a situation, we need to be able to adjudicate what happens. And that means using the rules to create a good thing that allows the fiction to maintain, right? So that's number 4. That's adjudication. Number 5. This one's unfortunate. This again, GMs wear a lot of hats. Okay. Number 5 is mediation, aka herding cats. You are going to be working with a group of people. Historically, people who play TTRPGs are fucking nerds and losers and very socially inept. Now, that's changing. And of course, we're all, all over the, we all have our own crosses to bear. But, historically, they're not always the easiest going group. And there's going to be conflicts. There's going to be conflicts between you and the players. There's going to be conflicts between players. And somebody has to be the adult in the room. Now, ideally, you're all playing with adults. But at the end of the day, to a certain extent, unless you're playing like a fully co-op game, the buck stops with you as the game master. And a lot of times the key to mediating a problem is to be aware of it. This kind of ties into some of the other things that we talked about, like communication, is to be aware of the problem before it becomes a problem, right? That way you don't have to get to this really dramatic explosion moment. So, managing your player interactions with each other and with you, resolving conflicts, maintaining the harmonious environment of your gaming table. This is an unfortunate skill that we have to have, but we do have to have it. And sometimes, again, some of these, a lot of these principles are going to merge into each other, just like any good apocalypse world list of principles. You might say, draw maps, leave blanks, but then you also see think off screen too. And you're like, oh, wow, I can totally see how those two separate principles could also kind of overlap to create even a sort of a shadow principle. Sometimes mediation means not necessarily resolving a player conflict, but maybe a player goes, hey, I want to do this thing in the game, and it's really important to my idea of my character, or I don't like the way this rule works. So it sort of becomes an issue of communication and adjudication and, how much improvisation and adaptation do you want to do in order to sort of, be mindful of this player. Now, I have said many times on this channel that I think the whole idea that the primary goal of the game master is for everyone to have fun. Now, I've said that I do not believe that is true. And now that does not mean that I don't think that as a game master, you don't accept a certain amount of responsibility for making your game fun. But to be clear, I think everyone at the fucking table should take a more than healthy amount of responsibility for making the game fun. The game master is just one person. There are 4 or 5 other players. So, if anything, the lion's share of it should be on their side of the screen. That being said, while I don't think it's the number one goal of a game master, I do think it is something that you need to do. And you do need to be thinking about the well-being of the people at your table. Otherwise, things can go south. And so as a game master, as sort of a natural person who occupies a position of authority, you need to be prepared to live with that responsibility. And sometimes that means, dropping the hammer. Sometimes it means making tough choices. And I know that these are things going back to the whole, we're a bunch of, socially awkward nerd people. This can be a really, really tough skill for a lot of people to handle, because you might have to tell somebody no. You might have to tell somebody to grow the fuck up. You may have to ask someone politely to leave. You may have to demand that someone never come back. So this could be tough, but it is a skill. All right. So now I said before that a lot of GMing is just getting the problems out of the way. All right. I'm trying to get through my list before I start going back through the chat, which I do want to do, by the way. I do want to go through the chat, but I do like John's post here. It seems like you got to have an amount of emotional intelligence to play a cooperative or co-narrative game. Yes. I mean, that is, psychopaths need not apply, right? Sociopaths need not apply. These are fundamentally cooperative games, and you do need to be aware of it. And also, too, I don't want to get up on a soapbox, but, it is selfish and wrong for you to assume that everybody else is at the table, including and especially the GM, just to service and entertain you. Like, you have as much responsibility as anybody else there to do the damn thing. All right. So the last tier, and again, this is tier 1 here, communication. This is our tier 1. This is our tier 2, right? This is our tier 3. So tier 4, last broad skill group, is storytelling / directing. Now, again, I think that this is a skill that as a game master, you should have the ability to craft stories. And I don't mean writing a pre-written plot that, you're going to force down somebody's throat. But what I do mean is that, and one of the reasons I put it at the bottom is because fundamentally, I think that if you have the first 5 in place, then you have hopefully removed most of the blockers, and the group will be acting so harmoniously, and the group will be reacting so well that your need to heavily handedly shape the story will be minimal. But let me be very clear about something here. When I'm the game master, I'm there to play too, baby. I want to have my mark on the story as well. And of course, my philosophy, you have to remember, comes from a very different place than most of you all. I feel like I'm the game master, but I am reacting to my players rather than them reacting to me. And I want to be able to add cool things to the story, and I want to be able to add cool things to the fiction just like they did. And so for me, my skill set here is what can I do in my unique role as the game master that maybe as a player you're not as well positioned to do. And if I have a flaw as a player, it's oftentimes that I'm still thinking very much in a storytelling and directing position, probably maybe even more so than you would typically want a player to do. But I do think as a game master, this is where, again, I am a synthesis of everything that has come before me. This is where I really put on my Powered by the Apocalypse hat. This is where I start thinking about my agendas and my principles. What am I really trying to do here? What is the tone? What is the genre? What is going on? How do I service the truth, the fiction? But at the same time, I also have a responsibility to make this exciting, to make this dangerous, right? Maybe for the game that I'm playing. But what if I'm not playing a game? What if I'm playing Wander Home, which I don't think really technically has a game master, but what if I'm playing Wander Home, okay? Or what if I'm playing Ryutama? Well, I still have a principle and I still have an agenda. It's to create an amazing world, to fill it with life and cultures that are both, amazing in their diversity and, potentially awe-inspiring in their grandeur, their scale. That's my goal. So as a game master, my job is to make sure that those principles and agendas get delivered. Right? So for me, these are the 6 main areas that a game master needs skill in. And of course, a lot of these things can be broken down into many, many subjects, and we'll go through. We'll hit these things all up one at a time. Maybe we'll get through all of them. I don't know. Maybe we won't. But as always, if you like to support this channel, that's typically how I know if I'm going to do a part 2 or a part 3 of something. Is did we get a lot of people showing up? Did we get a lot of people engaging? Did we get a lot of people tipping and super chatting? All right, let me catch up here real quick with some of the things. I'm sorry if I missed something that you said. Again, that's the other nice thing. Super chats and tips are very immediate and in my face. Otherwise, I'm just scrolling through the chat here. GM Scott says, knowing the rules well enough to know when to bend them or ignore them. Exactly. But at the same time, a lot of GMs, I think, get too comfortable. And they think that, there's a metaphor here for our modern day society, that people who think that the rules are beneath them. I do not believe as a game master that the rules are beneath me, that I'm better than the rules, that I know better than the game designer did. But the game designer isn't here, and we're in this very unique situation, and I need to make an adjudication and a call that is going to be the best for my game. And that doesn't necessarily mean the most fun. For me, typically, it is what supports the fiction, what's going to keep the conversation going, what is going to support my agenda and my principles, and how do I make use of the mechanical interfaces, which I'm already aware of, to make the best ruling. Like if I'm playing a D20 game and I need to pull something out of my ass, I'm probably not going to ask the players to make a D percentage check, right? I'm probably not going to suddenly, in a game with scaling DCs and modifier bonuses, aka 5th edition, 4th edition, 3rd edition, Pathfinder 2, I'm not suddenly going to say, all right, make an attribute check, roll D20 and roll under your stat. And you're like, wait, what are we playing? Are we playing Dragonbane? Like, I could make that ruling. I could make that adjudicated ruling, but that doesn't vibe with what we're trying to do in a D20 game. And none of the other aspects of the game sort of interact with it. So that's why I try to think about being able to know what the game is. GM Gray, glad to be here for a little bit before my partner comes home. Most days you stream, you're running a game. Well, listen, that's a totally reasonable excuse to miss a stream, but we're happy to have you here. Daylight savings time made it difficult. I know. I wish I could. I really do want to try to do more early streams for sure. We just had somebody today was I can't remember who it was in the Patreon, but they were like, "Hey, do you think you could maybe do like a EU friendly stream?" And I was like, yeah, I definitely need to at least once a month, throw in a really EU friendly or other side of the world friendly stream for sure. Bouts of fisticuffs do definitely work. John says he offers his services as asshole. John noted. Although John is not an asshole, he is a prince. Let's see here. Matthew had a question. Do you believe that these 6 principles are true for all TTRPGs in the same way? Is improvisation the same skill set in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Burning Wheel, and Apocalypse World? That's a great question. The answer is they're all the same. However, the amount with which your players and you as a game master come into a game expecting certain skills to apply is going to vary depending on the game system. It's actually pretty funny, but like I play Apocalypse World or PBTA games, actually super rules as written. And the reason is because that game system is intrinsically set up to allow for the game master to adapt and improvise. So you are following the rules when you're making something up. Certain other games, like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, have tried to create a rule or an answer for everything. And depending on the situation that you and your players find yourselves in, you really need to ask an important question. And that is, what is more important to you and your group? The fiction, and when I say the fiction, I cannot stress this enough. We did an entire stream on this. The fiction does not mean the GM's made up story or whatever the adventure path is. The fiction just means what is happening in the game world. The best example I can give to you is there is a room full of you're fighting in a library, okay? And it's full of ancient tomes, one of which contains a ritual that you need in order to, do some MacGuffin. All right. And the players have come here. And as they enter the library, they hear the cackling sound of the Grand Librarian, who is now some sort of undead spellcaster lich librarian thing, And maybe there's a riddle or maybe there's something. And then they end up having a fight. Okay, fine. And by the way, everything I've just described before, this could be AD&D First Edition. This could be Third Edition D&D. This could be Pathfinder Second Edition. This could be Fifth Edition. This could be Dungeon World. All right. Well, I think we're all in agreement with there. But the fiction, okay, is we're fighting an undead librarian in this ancient library full of these moldering, dusty tomes. Okay? Good. Now, Bob, sorry, Bob. Bob is playing a wizard. He's playing a sorcerer. And this would literally, by the way, happen. This has never happened, but I'm can completely visualize this in my brain. I describe that. That's the whole situation. I make this cool intro scene of the crackling librarian coming down, and and he's just like, shh, or I'll throw you out. And Bob wins initiative, and the very first thing, and of course Bob's not a wizard; he's a sorcerer. And Bob goes, "I fireball him." And to be clear, when Bob says that, and again, I'm picking on Bob, but I think Bob would do that. Mike, when we played Dark of Winter, when I was playing, Bob was a sorcerer. He played a dragon sorcerer. Anyways, Bob would throw a fireball and he wouldn't even be thinking about it. Okay, and this is where you can get into these weird situations because Bob's not even thinking about the fiction. All right, Bob says he'd magic missile him. It's just safer. Okay, all right, fair enough, Bob. But Bob would throw a fireball. And let's say we're playing Pathfinder Second Edition, Bob throws the fireball. Aaron, okay, Smith is going to cringe and he's going to go, "Bob, what are you doing? No!" And Bob's going to go, What? Why what? Because I used an AoE? Should I have used magic missile? What? And Aaron's going to go, "Bob, fucking idiot, we're fighting in a library full of books that we need one of them. What are you doing throwing a fireball?" And of course, Aaron is just reacting because to him, role-playing games are real. But the fiction, because he's thinking about the game through the lens of the fiction. And yes, if a massive ball of flame exploded in the center of the room, it's possible that the library would catch on fire and that the valuable tome that you came here to get would be destroyed. But in Pathfinder Second Edition, that fireball would destroy nothing. So this is a very critical moment. This kind of transcends any of these skill areas. You need to make a decision. What is more important to you and to your group? The fiction or the mechanics, right? The rules. You need to pick one. And once you pick one, you got to be consistent with it because it's just going to confuse the shit out of everybody if you don't. And so, because then it'll get, what you end up in is a situation, kind of a GM fudging, right? Of GM bias, because sometimes the game master is going to say, "Well, that's the rule and it doesn't do anything. And so you're just shit out of luck." But then other times the GM is going to be like, "Oh, I think that's a really cool idea. And I kind of want to let them do that. And, that totally works. That totally works." And that's just going to create, going back to skill 5, mediation, that's just going to create confusion, bad problems. It's going to impact your ability to communicate because no one's going to understand what the fuck is going on. And that's why you kind of have to pick a lane. Is what your character can do what's in the fucking book? Or can I just react the way that as if this was a real quote unquote game world and, things will operate and function the way that I can. Now, that's not to say that the fireball has to blow up all of the books. It is entirely possible that the GM will say that, the flames crackle and the flames ripple over the pages of many of the books, leaving them scorched, but strangely unburned. And then the lich, or the lich librarian is basically like, outraged and incensed and says, "How dare you use flame here? It's like, lucky for you, these tomes have a magical binding or whatever that keep them safe from flame and rot and wood, whatever." You could do that. It's kind of backpedaling, but at least you are trying to make what just happened make sense in the fiction. All right. So the answer is, I would say all the books are safe minus the book we needed. Incorrect. Okay. Here's what I would do. All right. if you're playing at home, see how you would do. If Bob threw that fireball and I was playing pretty much any game, probably including Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but especially if I was playing, because I'm always thinking in the terms of Dungeon World of Power by the Apocalypse. What would I do? Well, of course, the fireball would go off. And if there was any opportunity, I would consider that a golden opportunity. So what would I make? I could make as hard of a move as I'd like. Now, I could say, and the book is destroyed. But, the tension there, I want there to be a curve to the tension. So what I'm going to do is make like a soft, hard move. And I'm going to say that the flames quickly ripple throughout the entire room. Books and tomes begin smoldering. As that happens, you suddenly see it. The book that you came here to get. It's across the room, and it is surrounded by bookshelves which are beginning to smolder and catch fire. What do you do? So I'm escalating the situation. I'm creating more tension. It's kind of a soft move because I'm not necessarily saying the book is destroyed or even on fire, but I am implying that it's going to quickly go up there. Would you present the stakes up front before the fireball goes off? Now we're getting completely off topic. It depends, Andrew. I mean, I think the fiction of the situation, again, if we were literally in a situation where a player goes, whoa, I thought you said this library was massive. I was imagining that this guy was like really far away from all of these books. I didn't think that I was going to fireball them. But, if the player was like, oh, yeah, no, that checks out. I kind of really didn't think about that. That'd be fine. At the same time, I don't necessarily know that I have to present the stakes when the fictional outcome is pretty obvious, right? Like if I'm saying an ogre raises up his massive warhammer to smash you, I don't have to kind of tell you what the stakes are because it's kind of implied that you're going to get pasted if it does connect or whatever. Anyways, and I know a bunch of people here are talking about fireballs in the chat, but that's sort of an example. All right, so. We've got, what do we got here? All right. So we've got communication, prep, organization, improvisation, adaptation, aka water ring, adjudication, mediation, and storytelling and directing. So let's start. Let me get completely off here. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Here we go. All right. So let's get started with communication. So this is more just some quick idea, or I don't even know if I want to call them ideas, but quick sort of notes or helpful things that I can sort of reference. And I just saw that we had a super chat. Dr. Waits. I need to set my limits. A few years of running multi-games a week has taken its toll. I broke down before my last session. I'm so tired. How do I take a break without disappointing everyone? Dr. Waits, if these people are even worth your time remotely, you just simply say that. And you know what? You could tell them the truth. You could just say, hey, everybody, I'm really, really burned out. And we're not playing. I need to take a break. I need to recover. I need to rejuvenate. And you need to be honest with yourselves as well. Are you tired and need a break, or are you done? And if you're done, if you're honestly done, then you're not doing anybody any favors. Now, look, sometimes, I'll take a bullet. If I'm over a campaign, even as a player or as a game master, and we're near the end or we're near like a really critical moment or milestone, sometimes I'll tough it out. If it's only a couple more sessions. But if you're running multiple games a week, listen, Dr. Waits, when I was running games, I was running a Legend of the Five Rings game and a Pathfinder 2 game for my home system. And then, of course, I just started this channel, and we were getting started to it. And I went to the group and I said, guys, I'm so busy running games for the channel. I can't run these games for you. I'm sorry. I need to step back. And I said, I'll run the Legend of the Five Rings game, but I won't run our Pathfinder 2 game for our home game. And what happened? One of my players, Smith, stepped up and he said, cool, I'll run a campaign. And it was like, awesome, great, thank you. That's a lot of fun. I still love hanging out with you guys, but maybe this is an opportunity for another GM to step up. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to consider switching systems, or, maybe get together with the same group of people if you still want to have that social outlet, but maybe you just, maybe you just play some board games, or you play some one-shots of RPGs that you're not really going to take seriously. Or, like I said, maybe a new campaign spins up. But you need to be very honest with yourselves about whether or not you want to take a break or you're done. Because telling people, hey, everybody, things are just real crazy right now in my life. I'm kind of falling behind on some stuff. I need to take a break for a couple of weeks. Let's call it quits for May, and let's get back together in June. That's totally fair. And I'm not saying that like anyone's going to point a gun to your head and hold you to it. But if you know that you're not going to be wanting to play back in June either, then be honest with them. Or just say them. They say like, hey, we need to take a break for a couple weeks, and I got to reassess like what we're doing with this campaign. Now, that being said, again, if these people have been playing for a couple of years, you do need to potentially think like, are we in a good spot? Like, again, maybe sometimes you need to take a bullet. Like, if they're like right at the end of a campaign, or right at the end, it doesn't have to be all the way to level 20, but maybe they're right at the end of an adventure, or they're right at the end of a big player milestone that they've been working really hard for. Maybe you just tell them, you say, hey, everybody, I need to take a break from this campaign, but you guys are really excited. We're about to, you guys are about to, complete the ritual, and you're going to summon the crystalline ward over the Imperial capital. And I think that would be like so awesome to see. And you guys have worked really hard for that. So let's play another session or two and see if you guys can accomplish that. And then, if we can, and if you guys are successful, I feel like that's going to be a good stopping point for me, for us to take a step back, and I need to reconsider, yada, yada, yada. So I do think that, it starts with being honest, but it also starts with being honest with yourself. And what do you want? So yeah, have them join KLC. We'll just run games for them. That is also an option as well. So again, apologize if I miss any of your questions in chat, just because I'm whenever I'm doing the whiteboard, I'm more heads down. All right. Communication. All right. So let's do this. Okay. What the hell? Alt A. Okay. There we go. All right. So the first thing, communication. What word mean? All right. Communication. Number one, clear descriptions. Now, these aren't in any particular order. I literally just wrote these down because we picked this topic today. You need to practice giving vivid, concise descriptions. Vivid means that you need to communicate to your players, okay, when you're playing in a game with, because again, there's communication of just like, hey, to be clear, we're getting pizza and you're picking it up. That is an important part of communication, but that's like an important part of communication in life. But specifically for communication as a game master, as a dungeon master, as an MC, a lot of what you do is you are the player's eyes and ears, okay? You are the window through which they look at the entire world. You are all of their senses, and you are all of their sensory inputs. So when I say vivid, what I really mean is, let's set a bare minimum, right? Bare minimum of 2 senses. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you hear? What does it feel like? What's the temperature like? Give them at least 2 of these sort of sensory moments. And this is this is just as critical. Concise. All right? I mean, short and to the point. One of the things that you'll notice about my GMing style is it's short and to the point. This doesn't need to be a monologue. In fact, in many cases, the more short and concise, the more vivid and concise that your descriptions of things are, the more players will remember them, right? Oh, right, that's the, fat, smelly guy. Oh, right, that's the the mournful, that's the cemetery with the blue mist and the mournful sounding wind. That's it, right? It should be potent. It should be standing out. When you start giving paragraphs of text like so many of these fucking adventures do, players, you don't have, I don't care how good your imagination is, players don't have the time for that. So they're just gonna burn out, and it's just gonna go through one ear and out another. Dr. Waits is heading out. Got to run their third game in 7 days. That's a lot, buddy. That's a lot. You really should consider taking a step back. I think I'll have one of my players take over for me after tonight. Well, good. Hopefully you have that conversation. And again, hit us up on the Discord. Let us know what's going on. So you want to bring these scenes to life, but you don't want to bore your players. And more importantly, you don't want to just waste everybody's time. Keep it moving, keep it engaged. And of course, with everything, when you're talking about clear description, vivid, concise, and imply next steps, right? Your description should be short to the point, but it should also kind of have this lingering question, all right? And it should provide a focus for where the players may ask the next set of questions, all right? And if something's important, you should describe it. The whole, like, I believe in being open and honest, and we'll talk about this. That's actually a later one I talked about, but again, we can kind of do it right now, actually, but okay. You don't need to be too clever or coy when you're describing things, all right? Anyone who's GM for a long time knows this. You could literally be playing a mystery game, and all the players want to do is solve the mystery. And then in the description, you could basically say, also, the thing that you're looking for is over there on the bookshelf. And there is maybe only a 50% chance that any one of your players will have even noticed that. Okay? There is a lot going on in these games, and especially in the modern sense, right, where you have these very complicated games. If you're playing Old School Essentials or whatever, or Karn or Maze Rats or whatever, and your character sheet is the size of a Post-it note, and you have two numbers on your character sheet, okay, maybe the players are more dialed in, but but even then, you can beat players over the head with it. So don't try to be too clever. Don't try to be too coy. I'm not saying that you literally have to tell them what it is, right? But if the players are here looking for, maybe a piece of jewelry, a ruby brooch, I might say as I enter into the room, right? Blah blah blah. There's a desk. You see that there is a bookshelf or some sort of display or trophy case in the back corner, filled with an array of pieces of art and the glint of gems. You also see, another door. Right, exactly. So, am I being obvious that there's a bunch of gems on the bookshelf in the back of the corner of the room? Yeah, but also that's what a player would see. You are supposed to be the stand-in for their eyes and their ears and their nose. So you should just be very upfront with it. So I really like this idea of implying what the player should do. Okay. This is like a side note. This is a personal pet peeve. This is just my recommendation. I hate it. Don't do it. Do not describe the monster last.
Sync 57 tip $25. Finally catching one of these live. Just wanted to say thank you for all the great content.
Sting, which is a great name. I don't know if you mean the Elven Blade or if you mean the artist or performer. Sting, thank you very much for that extremely generous tip. I greatly appreciate it. Appreciate you coming in and stopping by, and happy to have you here live. That is really exciting. And I want to say you are welcome. It's because of this incredible community and folks like you that I do what I do. Obviously, the financial support means a lot, but I also really, really value these conversations that we're all able to have. I'm learning a lot, just like you all, because a lot of times the questions that you all ask me force me to have to think about, like, well, why do I do it that way? And could I do it better? And I've learned as much from, I think, sometimes from this community as they have learned from me. All right. So Jackal says, describing the monster last, aka the AV special. So this is like a bonus one that I was just thinking about. I didn't have this one written down in my notes. There's nothing wrong with when the players enter into a room and maybe the bookshelf containing the brooch, the ruby brooch that they're looking for is, right there on the back wall. But if there is a hulking minotaur skeleton in front of them, wielding a gleaming black axe that's surrounded by a necrotic field of energy, that tends to tunnel vision your people, right? It not only tunnel visions, because again, you're trying to sort of represent what it would be like to be in that room. And you know what? When you come into the room and this gigantic skeletal minotaur comes striding out of the darkness or into your torchlight, or if it's a modern game, everybody saw it perfectly fine when you entered because everybody has dark vision, then that probably means that the rest of that text can wait. You might just very casually say, a gigantic minotaur strides amongst you in a room strewn with furniture and other, office dwelling beasts, and then the creature raises up its massive axe. And then you get right into it. Now, if a player wants to take the next step while you're in the middle of this chaotic situation, for example, if we were playing Dungeon World, and I would say, what do you do? Okay. And one of the first players says, I'm going to quickly look around. Like, is what we're looking for in this room? Well, okay. That player is considering the fiction. And we can see what this would be like in the movie, right? Like the monster striding forward, and there's a quick cut over to this other character. Maybe it's the sly roguey one. And he's taking a quick look around the room. Now, most Power by the Apocalypse games have a move for that, which allows you to kind of look around the room, basically. And they could fail at that role, in which case I would get to make a move, and then that would give me the sort of impetus. The rogue kind of got caught flat-footed because they were looking around, and then suddenly they look back, and the Minotaur axe is sailing down at their head. What do, right, while they're looking for it? Or maybe you give them an opportunity with or without a cost. You say, the Minotaur is moving to intercept between you and the ruby brooch, which you see on the far side of the room. What do you do? And maybe the rogue says, I nimbly dodge between the Minotaur's legs and I try to come up on the other side of it and rush to the other room to grab the ruby brooch. They could do that, and that might trigger another move. So again, we're just playing off the fiction here. But the point is, I want to, I want to put, I do not describe the monster last. I think that is, just such a, for me, that's just such an important thing here. Let's see here. I don't know if that's like a GM skill, KC, but I will say that that is something that for me goes back to the old Dragon Magazine articles, which had the rules of dungeon craft. And I have to imagine that Mike Shea, aka Sly Flourish, was inspired by those rules. And those rules of dungeon craft. And I've talked about them on this channel before, but one of the things that I always try to do is, I try to make locations fantastic. I try to make them interesting. We're playing a fantasy game, let's lean into that. And again, Solana, this goes back to the don't be too clever or too coy. I tend to overshare with my communication. I tend to give the players, because I want them making good choices. I mean, this ties in more into my GM philosophy, but it starts with communication. They need to know what's going on. And sometimes I need to be very clear with them because I want them to understand the consequence. Maybe they don't. I'll be like, okay, you guys can stay here, but if you do, those goblins are coming back and with reinforcements, right? Or you could move on. But you know what I mean? Like I want them to understand what is at stake. So again, I don't try to be too clever. I don't try to, gotcha, right? I mean, there's a lot of problems with the way that monsters are presented in the text usually. It's actually kind of a problem for me with boxed text in general in adventures. And generally speaking, boxed text is something I've never enjoyed. And this is not a modern thing. Boxed text started coming out, even probably back in first edition. But I prefer older edition style of adventures where it's just like basic information about the room and then there's some monster stats. And there's like no description at all. It's all entirely up to the GM. Albastine. That's an area I need to get better at. My fantasy villages are always just medieval villages. And that is exactly what that is aimed at. When the players go into a village, maybe maybe they're, maybe there's a water elemental that runs, their water wheel, right? And it's turning the thing. This is a fantastic fantasy world. A lot of times, D&D games get really, it doesn't have to be like literally magical either, right? Maybe their village is up in a tree, and like this massive carved great oak, or there's a million things that you could do that don't necessarily have to be like overtly magical. But I think that a lot of times we get in this weird juxtaposition where it's like half the game is like crazy, weird magic. And then suddenly here's a village that looks like it's out of a Renaissance fair, What's up, Doc Flamingo? Glad to have you here. What do you do about blurters if you describe the Minotaur first? The moment you said Minotaur, they say, I attack. Albastine, I would say, excellent. Okay, Albastine is charging forward at the Minotaur. London, rule of cool. What are you doing? And I'll shoot back to Albastine. Albastine, our war cry or what does it look like as you're charging the Minotaur? And maybe Albastine says, oh, I'm pulling out my great sword and I'm kind of maybe doing a leap into the air before I smash him. I'm like, sweet, awesome. Everybody, Albastine, you know him. He's charging the Minotaur head on. They're gonna clash right into the middle of the room. What is everybody else doing? And then the rogue says, well, I'm going to take a quick look around and see if the brooch is here. And I'd be like, great, we'll get right back to that. Albastine, okay, you're in the air. The sword is coming down. Make a hack and slash roll. Or make a D20 attack roll. And then you might hit or roll and I might pause your resolution to shoot back over to the rogue to see what they say, because I might use the rogues problem when you're playing like a very proceduralist D&D 20, like everything has to go by the book type thing. And that I could see where that could become more of an issue, but, I say versus. Thank you for the super chat. Oh, we lost audio for a moment. Okay. We've been having some audio problems. I don't know what to tell you. I have to check. I may have to check. I may have to what? New tip goal. Maybe Derek needs a new streaming PC, or maybe I need a new USB, new motherboard. Actually, I would probably need a new motherboard. Anyways, save versus. Thank you. I tend not to describe enough. Fate's 3 things on an index card help me focus on what's important. Yeah, I mean, Fate. Like I said, any advice I'm giving you has probably been given better by other smarter, clever, more better meaning people who have more time to think about these kind of questions. But yeah, I mean, jot down the 3 things that they need to know. The room is on fire. There's catwalks and metal stairways, and on the far side of the room is a large bank of some sort of, computer terminals. That's it. That's all you need. The 3 things. We can interact with that. That gives us plenty of scenery to chew on, some aspects to tag if we want to do that. So that's kind of where we're at. You thought yes, the old $5 to mute Derek's situation. Yes. Okay. All right. So clear descriptions. Don't be too clever, coy. Don't describe the monster. Last, kind of a bonus tip. All right. Next one. Again, this is under communication. Active listening. Pay attention to what your players are saying. It's a very tough skill. There's a lot of players. There's a lot of them. And a lot of times, I think about Bob as a GM, and I think about Bob as a GM in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Not saying that this is nothing about Pathfinder 2nd Edition innately. It's about Bob playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition. When Bob is playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition, if I'm being honest with you all, when I'm playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I may not be listening to my players because I'm trying to figure out what the fuck this monster can do. Okay? I'm trying to figure out how many checks this trap requires in order to overcome and what skills are used and what's the DC. I'm trying to remember if there's any ongoing effects in this room. Is there anything I need to draw on the map that indicates that there's difficult terrain or something else? My brain's processing power is limited. And I think such an important skill is active listening. Now, that being said, there are players out there, people out there who are so intimately familiar. This, by the way, again, all ties into the same set of skill sets, being prepared and knowing what's up. I think there's a big difference, okay? And I'm talking to you. You know who you are. There's a big difference between somebody who's running, let's say, a published module or adventure, and they've never really looked at that encounter before. They've never looked at that monster's stats before. They just went, oh, okay, yeah, okay. They're fighting some weird tentacle monster. Okay, I got it. And so when the actual game is happening, they have no fucking clue what this thing does. And you're basically reading it for the first time, trying to figure out, how does it work? Is there a strategy? Is there a tactic? Right? And again, raising my hand, guilty. And all that does is it pulls me out of being able to focus on what I think is a really important skill, active listening. Because just as I said, it's a conversation, right? So we've talked about the GM being generous with their descriptions and with their information, okay? But the other important part of a conversation is you have to be listening, all right? You need to understand, okay, intentions. You need to understand their intentions. You need to understand their understanding of the situation. Okay, a lot of times this happens through active listening. When someone says something to me, I need to be paying attention to go, do they know what they're talking about? Like, did they miss something? I'm paying attention to what they're talking about. But I can see that they might have missed something really, really critical. And I might stop and say, let me clarify, And they'll go, oh no, I didn't think about that consequence. Or I didn't realize that the flames had reached that high in the ceiling. And I'm like, yeah, no, when I said they went all the way up, I meant they went all the way up to the ceiling. And the player's like, okay, cool. All right, so now I'm getting a better understanding of it. And again, all I'm doing is paying attention. And this is where I struggle a bit with, I see Bob mentioning VTT in chat. For me, so much of my ability to game master well, I wouldn't even be the person to do the stream. We could do a whole stream about game mastering on a VTT. But I need to see people. I need to read them. I need to see their body language, their eyes, the tone. That's just so important to me being successful in doing something like this. So paying close attention is important because it's going to give you the information that you need. I mentioned understanding, but also intentions. Sometimes players can be a little coy themselves. They don't want to necessarily spill the beans about what it is that they're trying to do. So as a GM, you need to constantly be sort of paying attention and being like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? And sometimes players, I'm going to throw some players under the bus here. Sometimes players will be trying to trick you. Okay. Like they're trying to get you to agree to something. Okay. It's like a bait and switch. They're trying to say something that seems innocuous. You agree to it. And then they go, ha ha. And inside that bag was actually an explosive. And so when they take it, it blows up. Ha ha ha. Gotcha, GM. I fooled you, sucker. That is fucking toxic ass behavior. And I can't stand that. This is where I talk about intention being so important. And this is, again, a two-way street, but as a GM, you need to sort of be thinking all the time, being like, do I know what you're trying to do here? And to be clear so we can understand what is the right check. This is especially important, by the way, in games like Powered by the Apocalypse, because understanding the intention is so important to understanding what move might be triggering or not. Like a classic example of this, if you watch our Root actual play, is, Bob was, it was either Bob, I think it was Bob or Smith. They were trying to lie, or they were trying to say something to the lizard cult person. And I was just like, and they were like, oh, I'm going to roll this skill. And I was like, well, wait. But like, you don't actually believe that, do you? And they're like, well, no, but he does. And I'm like, right. But you are trying to lie to them. So the right move to trigger, the right mechanic to use is the lying or deceiving skill, or lying or the deceiving trait, because I know why you're trying to use that move, because you have some sort of advantage on your character sheet, or you're trying to trigger one of your XP triggers or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, we need to know what the intention was, so that way we can properly, resolve the action. Bob confirming it was him. I think I got the gist of that right, Bob. I don't exactly remember what why you were trying to do it, but I was like, there's a miscommunication here, right, between your intention and what's actually happening in the fiction, and it's my job to clear that up. Exactly, Albustine. The leading question, BS, just tell me what you want to do. I'm the GM, right? Like it's like the classic, like your parents when you're a kid, like, if you don't tell me what happened, I won't be able to help you. And I mean, some of that comes from, trauma in players, feeling like the GM is against them, or maybe feeling like the GM is out to get them. So, yeah. And so they're loath to tell you what they're trying to do, because they feel like you're gonna, shit on them or something like that. So, and again, you can tell I wrote these in a list, because like, as I thought of one, I would think of another one. So from active listening comes the follow-up to active listening, okay? Which is ask questions. And I think if you watch me GM, regardless of what the game is, if you watch me GM, unless we're playing a game that is like very clearly just like, even if it's just like hack and slash city, I always want to engage with my players by asking them questions. Now, the kind of questions I'm asking them can vary greatly depending on the type of game that we're playing, the understanding of how much narrative control, that you or your players are comfortable with players having. So, for example, I could ask a question like, you enter a tavern in a new town, and I turn to Neutromancer and I say, do you know anyone here? And they're like, I don't know, do I? And I'm like, well, I'm asking you, do you know anyone here? Some people aren't comfortable with that level of improvisation and player narrative control. That's totally reasonable. But at the same time, if you're not playing a game, a lot of people assume that asking your players questions means giving them narrative control. Well, no, because and I've said this before, the reason I play role-playing games, by and large, is because I want to see, how players are going to react to certain circumstances. I want to know what makes them tick. And so a lot of times the questions I'm asking are about their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, right? Their motivations. Okay. This is a great moment in any situation where I can come in for a moment and I could say, in fact, we I think we did like a whole, Bob again, confirm. I think we did an entire nightlife episode back when we were playing Rise of the Runelords in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We're playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We're playing the third adventure. The group is fighting a bunch of ogres up on a crumbling stone dam. It's the third adventure, the Storval Dam or something. And in the midst of it or something like that, I basically say like, Bob, like, how do you feel, and like, it was an opportunity for me to sort of get an insight into Bob's character. I can't exactly remember what had just happened. You're right. They weren't ogres. They were trolls. You're absolutely right. And, and Bob basically just said, I don't care. I'm just going to kill him. All right. So this is me trying to ask questions. This is me trying to get curious about characters, because for a lot of players who play role-playing games, their character is the reason that they are playing the game. And so as a GM, when you ask questions about the character, maybe it was like somebody asking, I don't exactly remember what it was. Point is, you and Nick both gave really shitty answers to it, is what it was. It's the long and short of it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong or bad. You were just making, very one-dimensional characters. Again, not saying that that's a problem. But asking players questions about their character, their emotional state, and like one of the things, like, oh God, one of the reasons I love PBTA games, okay, is like let's take a look at like a game like Avatar, okay? In Avatar from Magpie, you sort of have the modern PBTA Magpie framework of you have these conditions, right? Angry, and typically as a result of a character not rolling high enough, one of the things that the GM can do is assign a condition, right? So the GM could assign, angry, or they could assign afraid, or they could assign, I think embarrassed is one of them. Kind of pulling these out from memory. Okay. So let's say that we're playing a game of Avatar and your character, okay, who is like kind of a hot shot from where they come from, is told, okay, that they're too young to be able to enter into this special tournament or something like that, right? Your character tries to make a move. Maybe they're trying to convince these people to let you participate in this tournament. You roll low, and I say, they say, we're sorry, you're just not old enough, and that's final. And they slam the book shut, and they walk out. And I say, your character, I'm going to give you a condition, and I might say, how are you feeling right now, right? You tell me. I could just say, and you're angry about it. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask you, the player, how does your PC feel about this? Now I'm going to give you a condition, and maybe there's an opportunity, I don't know, for you to metagame this, but I'm asking you because I'm legitimately curious. I want to know about your character, and I want to know what they're thinking and what they're feeling. And when you tell me, you say, I'm thinking maybe they're going to say that they're embarrassed. Maybe I'm thinking that they're going to say that they're angry. And so maybe I'm playing with, Sims 3 Snowflake. And Sims 3 Snowflake says, you know what? I'm going to choose afraid. And I look back at them, and maybe they're choosing afraid because they want a metagame. I don't know. But I'm going to look at them, and I'm going to say, afraid? That's really interesting. Why are you afraid? Again, asking another question. And Sims 3 Snowflake says, well, I know how important it is that we get into this tournament. And by not getting into it, I'm afraid that without my skills, because, I'm the best, that my team isn't going to be able to compete, and we're never going to be able to stop the triads from doing their plot. And so I'm like, this has actually got me really nervous, because now I'm like, oh shit, like, how are we going to do this? And I'm like, wow, okay, that's a really interesting insight into how your character is perceiving this situation. It's a really interesting insight into how your character views themselves, their relationship to the rest of the party members, to the world, et cetera, et cetera. So again, it's all about communication. It's all about the conversation. And so that's what we're kind of going for here. All right. Something that I don't do particularly well is this next one. And that is adjust to your audience. Again, this is all under the communication skills. Everybody communicates differently. So, you need to be very mindful of how well your players are understanding your communication and how well you're understanding their communication. Some people may have, language challenges. Some people may have, maybe English isn't their first language. Or maybe you have some people who you can be extremely direct with, and you can be very blunt with them. Other players might need a more gentle and holding hand. All right. As I said before, a lot of GMing can come down to like psychotherapy. You need to know who are the players that you can be more direct with and more forceful with, and kind of really, point at them and say, hey, how are you feeling? Why are you feeling that way? And others, you need to be more cajoling. Again, this is information and tips that we've given on this stream before. But like, for example, if I'm playing with someone who is really, really good at, improv and coming up with cool ideas and on the fly, I might ask, Anon, I might say, Anon, you enter into a room and, there's a massive, piece of jewelry. What is it? What does it look like? And Anon goes, oh, okay. It's like just like without even hesitating, he's like, it's like a golden dragon statue, right? And it has like sapphires for eyes, and it's like surrounded in this like golden flame. And I go, okay, that's really cool. But if I'm talking to, I'll throw a Nutrimancer under the bus here. Nutrimancer, I might go, Nutrimancer would probably collapse under that question. And so when I ask that question to Nutrimancer, I'm maybe a little bit more directive. I'm like, oh, Nutrimancer, there's a statue of a dragon in the center of this room. But what kind of dragon is it? Is it like a red dragon, gold dragon, blue dragon? What kind of dragon is it? And, Nutrimancer now has a much more easy and guided way to answer. So being able to adjust to your audience is, I think, really, really important as a GM skill for communication. All right. Next. Feedback is really important. Again, communication is a wide range of skills. And I've talked about this on stream before, which is I think that asking for feedback at the end of a session is very, very valuable. And nowadays that we live in a world of group chats and IMs and DMs and emails and all that other stuff, I mean, you don't necessarily have to hand out a note card to everybody. You could even set up like an anonymous, feedback form, Google form or something, Survey Monkey. Get feedback from your group about you, but also about the game. And, one of the things that, like I said before, Smith always asks for feedback at the end of his game. And, one of the things that he always asks for is like, what's, something you like, something you disliked, and what's something, you want to see more of in the campaign or that you're interested in. So being, these are some of those conversations that are tough to have in the middle of a camp, in the middle of a session. But just even the simplest version, and again, don't make it a 25-page survey. Just make it short and sweet. And, if all of your players say, again, and if you're worried about honesty, just make it anonymous or something. If people are that concerned, and also too, I think as a GM, I used to be a professional photographer, and I belonged to some, photography groups. And, one of the things that people could do is they could post one of their pictures and they could ask for, critical feedback. They could ask for creative criticism, and they could specify in their post, did they want CC1, CC2, CC3, and I think it went up to CC4. And this is basically like, how direct and harsh do you want me to be? And if you're someone who only wants, be like, it's a great shot. I love what you're doing with the, with the imagery. I think it's a little dark, and I think if you probably just bumped it up a stop, I think you'd capture a lot more of the image, and I think it looks great. And the same person, if someone had said CC4, and they might say the leading lines are good, but they're not great. You definitely should have probably raised the camera up another foot. I think that would have given you a much better angle. You could have eliminated that annoying little branch in the upper right-hand corner that's just kind of distracting. Right? And they'll just nitpick you and pull it apart. That's fine. You just got to, be willing and honest to communicate with your group. How much feedback do you want, and how you, how are you going to take it? I mean, again, part of being a GM is being a big boy or a big girl. If you want to sit in the Iron Throne, okay, you're gonna have to make some tough decisions. You're gonna have to deal with some tough news, some tough feedback. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that, Derek. Don't say, did you enjoy the session? Bad question. Did you enjoy the session? Yes. How does that? It doesn't help you. And even if they say no, that doesn't help you either. No, a better question is to focus on, again, if you ask everyone, what is something that you liked about the session? Well, then if 3 or 4 of your party members all responded with, oh, that section with like the dwarven temple and the traps, and we had to go around and touch the different pressure plates in sort of order. And if everybody's like, wow, we really like that. Okay, that's great information. That's great communication, right? Because you're going to be like, oh, maybe my group really likes puzzles. Maybe they really enjoyed that. On the other hand, if everybody comes back and says, that part with the dwarven puzzle thing was just stupid and it took up too much time and like it was cool or whatever and like, but I not my favorite. Then you go, okay, maybe less of that, right? Maybe less of that. Again, not saying that you are beholden to your players having fun, but I mean, ultimately, right, we are here to create an experience that everybody can, kind of enjoy. So asking for feedback is an important part of communication. And when I say feedback, I mean like after the session. I mean maybe with players having enough time. Again, Aaron always used to hand out a 3x5 index card to us. We'd write our name, the date, and then we'd write the three things. And then usually we would actually go around the table and then we would still hand them in because again, we want to really bring this up and we really want to talk about it. Overall, you may notice a trend here, which is that if you and your group are more mature adults and with a more mature group, you're probably going to have a better time because you're going to be able to either have these skills already or you're going to be able to quickly develop them and get a good feel for each other. If you have, if you are a big baby, if you play with a bunch of immature assholes, you are going to have not as fun of a time as maybe me or the rest of us. That's tough. That's a tough spot. You can lead your friends to water, but you can't make them drink. You can work on self-improving yourself, but it's ultimately not your responsibility as a game master. And we'll get to the mediation part of it. But, sometimes, you gotta eliminate the problem at the source. All right. All right. So clear descriptions. Don't be too clever or concise or coy. Don't describe the monster last. Active listening, ask questions, adjust to your audience, ask for feedback. Moving on. By the way, you can already tell that we're going to be lucky if we finish communication. I'm sorry. People ask me questions and I have a lot to say. A lot of debate, people talk about theater of the mind. I like theater of the mind. I think it's cool. I think it's fast. I mean, the main thing I love minis. I love toys. I love cool looking troll minis and a really awesome Dwarven Forge setup. I love all that. It's just, it takes a lot of time and I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. That being said, visual aids to me are such an important way of communicating. Maps, drawings, sketches. These are fantastic. These things are, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I cannot tell you how often times in the history of me GMing, okay, while in the midst of describing something, what ended up happening? I grab my marker or I grab my, my dry erase marker or my wet erase marker and I start sketching something out on the Chessex pad. Or maybe I'm having a piece of paper and I X and O a bunch of different things. I'm communicating visually. And for some people, this is the only way that they can communicate. But I also think that there is a lot of value in sometimes showing people a picture, a cool piece of art. I think that it goes a long way. I am well known. I don't care if they see the fucking monster stats. I am well known when the players, encounter a monster that is something crazy and new because it's probably from Pathfinder 2. I just take the bestiary and I flip it over and I show everybody the monster. And if they want, they can squint their eyes and see that it has resistance 10 to fire. But I want them to have that visual moment and that way we can kind of all be on the same page. And I love, high quality artwork. So, for me, that's just such a cool way to sort of take place. Yes. And then Bob is 100% correct because then after showing a really, really cool mini, a really cool image, we'll just use the same mini that we've used for a Drider. We used it for a gelatinous cube and we used it for a horned devil. And then we'll do that. We're surrounded literally by like many, many thousands of dollars of miniatures. But like last week we were playing Forbidden Lands and the group was ambushing this group of bad guys called the Rust Brothers. And, we had our zone based combat and we're pulling off, like Aaron had these, like minis that represented like tents and campfires with little spit. Cause it was a camp. They were communicating, they were ambushing them at night while they were camped out in the wilderness. And then, but we just used dice for, we used white D6s for the main, for the bad guys. We used a D12 for like the leader, the sorcerer guy, right? We used D10s for like the heavily armored guards because, I don't have time to go through all those miniatures. Again, I love visual aids, but I love quick visual aids. This is why, if you look at most of my like campaign notebooks, going back to like games like Fate or games like Blades in the Dark, what you'll usually see when the campaign is all said and done is a stack of index cards, because I love using index cards. I love just creating clocks. I love writing traits or aspects about a scene and then throwing them out there on the table and letting, everybody see that. I am much less concerned about, the precise map, 5-foot square looking exactly correct. And in fact, in some cases, I think that having a super highly accurate map can sometimes actually be more of a detractor than others, because it can just force people to only think in terms of that one way. But visual aids, I think, are an important way of communicating. And it can really, for a lot of people, it can really cut down on miscommunication. That being said, I will say something. This is a quick aside. One of the things that I like about Theater of the Mind, especially in combat, this happens to me a lot when I play Dungeon World. I don't know that I've ever played Dungeon World that it wasn't just completely Theater of the Mind. One of the things that I do all the time when I'm playing Theater of the Mind Dungeon World, and I do this like over and over and over again. And you might think it is annoying, and maybe if you're an audience member watching us play, it would be annoying. But for the players at the table, what I basically constantly have to do is I constantly have to like say where everybody is. So I'll be like, okay, Neutromancer, you're moving around the cave wall, and you're trying to get behind the Necromancer. Okay, John, all right, so you're charging forward and you're engaging with the big golem creature. It swings back and forth at you. Meanwhile, Neutromancer, you're now like getting around behind the Necromancer, so we'll need you to stealth, right? Like and then like back to John, I'm always kind of like, it's like almost like I'm pushing F5 on the refresh of where is everybody? Because, and it might seem like that's really tedious, but what I feel like that does is it does a really good job of eventually syncing everybody up. It's like those, when you have the metronomes and they're all on the same platform and they're going at different oscillation frequencies, and then they eventually synchronize and they're all on the same, oscillation frequency. It's like by constantly refreshing everybody's awareness of what's going on, I think it draws people into the fiction in a way that a map never would. Because what a map does is it allows you to take that processing of where am I? What does this place look like? What am I doing? And it allows you to offload it. You don't have to think about where you are and what it looks like anymore. You don't have to keep that mental image of what's going on in your brain anymore, because you're able to essentially download it to the map, and the map does the heavy lifting for you. And this is great when you need to focus more on, which one of your 37 spells or which one of your 25 feats that you need to use, and how you're going to break up your, multiple action economy. That's probably a good thing. Otherwise your head might explode, unless you're Mark Seifter and his group. But for me, I think we lose something in that communication, So anyways, all right, now we're going to get into the more esoteric stuff here for communication. I think I only have a couple left. By the way, let me know in chat. You can show your support with some super chats if you want. Obviously, I said I have 6 skills, 6 skill groups. We're probably, honestly, only going to make it through communication tonight. And so, let me know with a like, let me know with a comment, let me know in the Patreon Discord, let me know with a tip or a chat, a super chat. Is this content that you guys want to enjoy? Because you know what? It is, sometimes these things do really well for us, and sometimes we get 300 views. So let me know. Sim says more, and Zerver says I like it. Yeah. And again, I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass, but if you're the type of GM, probably a GM, or you're thinking about GMing, if you're that type of person, then and you're watching this instead of watching, some 10-minute drama video or some 9-minute shill to buy somebody's new Kickstarter or some, 4 tips that you can use to make your fighter better or whatever. If you're watching this kind of content instead of that kind of content, it means that you do care. You are investing. I don't necessarily know that what I'm telling you is the most correct answer that you could ever possibly get to, but it means that you're curious, and it means you're thinking, and it means you're synthesizing information from a wide variety of sources, and that is what's so important. I love being told what to do. Shadram coming in with their 17-month membership chat. Shadram, thank you for the 17 months of support. More streams like this, please. This kind of content is why I keep subscribing here and on the Patreon. Nobody else covers this stuff well. Well, Shadram, it's because without memberships and super chats and Patreon, streams like this do very badly. And we would make like $35 a month, which wouldn't even cover my Adobe subscription. But thank you, Shadram, for the continued support. Thank you to all the people, by the way. I know we have some people out there who are, not only are they patrons, but they are also members of our channel. And you guys are crazy and you guys are great. I hope so, Anon. I mean, again, our purpose here is to entertain and to educate. So I definitely, I don't want it to always just be so philosophical. And, I know a lot of people want to come to a YouTube video and they want just the quick answer. Give me 5 seconds and tell me what's up. What's up, Jim Scott?
GM Scott tipped $25. This is for general support of this type of stream. I'll donate to the Origins Drink Fund in person.
All right. Well said, sir. Well said, sir. Thank you, GM Scott, for $25. Incredibly generous. We will move that over to the general support fund because GM Scott, of course, is going to be joining us in about a month's time, and we're going to be playing some games at Origins. All right. Alvestein tipping $10.
Alvestein tipped $10. I want to see the other 5 skills covered.
Right. Well, this is great. You guys are, thank you so much for all that incredible support. I wasn't trying to actually beg for it, but I really do appreciate it. Again, sometimes it's hard for me to see if a stream is doing well. Other streams can be like, hey, that video got 100,000 views, so I'm going to keep doing that kind of stuff. So for me, it's really just, letting your voices be heard. And again, what my patrons want is what we're going to do. London Matthews with a $2 says $1 for part 2, but another for the Girl by Moonlight, ever-growing tiling. It's going to continue to go on. We're up to $16 now, London. But thank you, Alvestein. Thank you, London, and thank you, GM Scott. And GM Scott, I am looking forward to those drinks, buddy. Actually, more than likely, I will probably just buy you drinks. John, great to see you. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care. Be real. Big fan of John. He's cool. All right. Where were we? Thank you, everybody, for that support. All right. So this is where we get into some tough conversations. I didn't really know how to say this. I'm going to say it this way. Matty Ice, $2. Definitely appreciate this kind of content. Thank you, Matty Ice. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your support. And it's awesome to see, like I said, for somebody to even give $1 or $2 to a channel is so much more than anybody else ever gets. So I really do appreciate every time everybody takes their moment to engage us. So thank you. A lot of GMs have this problem. I see it all the time. Now, I don't know if it's because they themselves are boring, but I oftentimes think it's just because they have so much going on that they, in the game, that they break down and they just turn into this monotone voice. Changes in your tone, your pitch, your speed of talking is so critical to communication. It ties back to everything else we want. If you are playing your game and you're just reading out of a book or you're just describing something. I'm pulling up. That's funny that you said add spice to your speaking. I literally pulled up a Dune book. That's really funny. If you're like 40 killed in artillery strike, Thorvald artillery struck a Novbruns depot on the northern side of Orodani 3. Analysts believe at least 40 were killed and 200 wounded. Prominent members of the Landsrad have issued formal condemnations to both houses. You're just going to put everybody to fucking sleep. I'm sorry. It's maybe it's a side tangent to this too, but learn to pronounce words. I understand that there's sometimes hard words or weird words. When I was playing Legend of the Five Rings, when I would write a character's NPC, okay, if I had an NPC named that, I would write down underneath it Hiroka, because I wanted to say it right. And if I didn't have it there, I would not know how to pronounce it. Now, the difference with Iomade is I just assumed I was pronouncing it correct, and everybody else pronounced it that way, so it was totally fine. It wasn't until I went on the internet with all of you fucking people, and I was like, they're like, oh, it's from London, and it's Iomade, and it's Iomade, and no one still fucking can tell me how you actually pronounce that, and no one actually agrees. Anyways. Iomide is horrible. That's like the worst pronunciation yet. Ohio Mayday. I like that one. So anyways, what I was trying to say though, I mean, I was dunking on pronunciation. But the most important thing is the tone. You're going to put people to sleep. And again, I see well-intentioned, in fact, in complete honesty with all of you, that is probably for me the number one thing that will cause me to not want to play with a GM. Like when I'll go to a convention and I'll be really excited because I usually play in things like indie games on demand. And, you're playing in a bunch of one shots, but it's all kind of ad hoc, and you just show up several times throughout the course of the convention to play in a game, and it's kind of random and it's different. But sometimes you'll get paired to you'll see that there's an opening for a GM. And I'll be like, I really want to play that game, but I'm not going to play with that GM. And the reason is because a lot of times the reason is because the GM is boring. Their speech pattern is boring. I can handle a GM who doesn't know the rules. I'm actually almost okay with that. But it's like, you're the MC, you're the master of ceremonies. It's your job to be your world, your game's hype man, You need to own it. You need to get a little bit of that swagger. You need to get a little bit of that confidence, right? You are the master of worlds, okay? Every potion your player characters drink, you mixed, okay? Every magical item that they lust for, you put it there, okay? You control worlds, universes. So act like it, Represent. Making the character. And by the way, let me be very clear about this. A very distant tertiary element of this is using unique vocal phrasing. Okay. Meaning, having a different voice for the barkeep as you have for the thing. Number one, I'll be honest completely. Number one, I'm really bad with these. Not the thing that I can't do voices. I have a limited palate. Mostly, man, I'm sounding like Kermit the Frog. But I never remember what that NPC was like the first time I did them. I just kind of made it up. I imagined some Muppet character and then I make it after that. But then when the players encounter them in the next session, I'm like, oh shit, was it fucking Kermit or was it Fozzie or was it Goofy? I don't remember which character I used. So I'll get it wrong all the time. So that is something to be considerate of. But what I'm really talking about is not so much your ability to give an NPC a really cool voice, but to inflect and to, if something's dramatic and exciting, you should be saying it in a dramatic and exciting way. Loud crashes, explosions rip through the area. I use my hands. I gesture. I want people, this should be like a theatrical presentation. All right. It's tough to hear, but you are the source of everything for these players. If you don't have energy, then it's going to seem like a very low energy scene. If you're not treating something like it's important, then people aren't going to think it's important. Right. And absolutely, Sims. Absolutely. Your energy should match the energy of the scene. If it's a quiet scene walking through the gardens of the Imperial Palace as the first snows of winter fall, you shouldn't be like, snowflakes fall from the sky like jagged diamonds, ripping through the few remaining leaves on the bonsai trees all around you. Snow, freezing cold, the threat of hypothermia, weighing over. No, that's not how you should. That's not how you should do the scene of snow falling, right? So find the energy, And GM Scott, you're absolutely right, And by the way, that's actually my final communication thing, which I'll skip ahead. We're here, whatever. GM Scott's doing this. You hear a lot of people, okay? They'll say, GM Scott says, don't tell something it's interesting, make it interesting. Absolutely. But a lot of times you'll hear this said as, show, don't tell, right? You hear that a lot. Show, don't tell. Fuck that. Show and tell. Show and tell. Do both. Hit him with the double barrel, right? Be like, I'm going to really describe in a cool way how angry this, barkeep or ogre is at you. But then, just in case beating you over the head with a hammer of it didn't do it enough, I'm also going to tell you. His rage is palpable. You can see the veins on his neck bulging as he loses his shit. Okay. And this is after I, described it in character or whatever. So show and tell. Use both. These are both forms of communicating, right? One is kind of in character or in world, and the other is more OOC. Don't feel like you should use one or the other. No, just use both. Use both. Use both. And by the way, that is also advice that I give. I know other people don't like to hear this, but I give that for players as well. Describe what your character's doing and then tell us all what your character is doing, because that way there's no ambiguity. There's no there's no hurt feelings. There's no mixed signals. Everybody gets what's going on. And if we need to, we can step back and we can reassess and we can communicate and we can make sure everybody is on the same page. A lot of PBTA games talk about this, making sure everybody's on the same page, that we're all understanding what the situation is. Now, how you are envisioning what the troll looks like may be slightly different than what, Mind Blown is envisioning the troll looks like. But as long as we all understand that the troll has the wizard in its claws and is about to swallow the wizard, as long as we all understand that and we understand the implication, that is not going to be a good thing for the wizard. As long as we're all on that same page, then we're good. At that point, once that's been told, then we can have all sorts of fun, cool descriptions. You can describe the troll's snapping of its skin as its back, which you had broke with your previous attack, begins to recorrect itself and begin snapping back into place. Right? Like that's cool. That's a very visceral element, a moment, kind of highlights how cool the troll's regeneration is. But what's important is that we're all on the same page. And then we can get creative with it, because that is fun. Fluffy bullshit time is fun. I know people think we hate fluffy bullshit time. We do not. Come to one of my games. You will see Smith, who coined the term fluffy bullshit time. We FBT like nobody's business. I love it. It's fun. I'm a creative person. Smith's twice the creative person I am. So, of course, we're fluffy bullshit timing. But you gotta do your homework first, right? You gotta eat your dinner before you can have your dessert. That's all I'm gonna say. So you gotta make sure that you do the job of communicating correctly and fully with your group. All right. So that was kind of like a Yeah, fleshy bullshit time. That's also a Smith favorite, but it's a little bit different. So now I skipped ahead a little bit here, but I do want to add some additional thing here. I highlight read more than watch movies. Watch movies can be useful, but reading more. Okay, I'm just all I'm telling you is what I did and how I got to where I'm at now. And this is going to sound very strange when I say read more, rather than watch movies, is because fundamentally you are using words to describe what you're telling to your players. So the value of reading far outsees movies. Now, don't get me wrong. You might see a really cool scene or a really cool visualization in a movie, and then you can use that to communicate an idea or a concept or a really gritty thing. But reading, I think, is so important because it's going to teach you how to communicate. And this is, by the way, this is like not controversial, but like I grew up reading what some people might say is now I read Wizard of Earthsea. It's probably my favorite series of all time. And of course I read Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And I think those are great sources. But I wouldn't say that they should be your primary source. Fundamentally, those are these magical, epic, beautiful, poetic, almost, they almost transcend what we're doing in a TTRPG. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't read Lord of the Rings. I'm not saying that you shouldn't read Wizard of Earthsea because they're beautiful books and they may help you to communicate ideas. But growing up as a young man, I read a lot of D&D novels. Okay? I'm talking Dragonlance. I'm talking Drizzt. Okay? I'm talking the Avatar. This is from Forgotten Realms. Okay, the Avatar trilogy. I'm talking Catterley and the Cleric's Quintet. All right? I'm talking about TSR or Wizards of the Coast branded novels. Okay? And why? Well, because these are authors who, number one, they play D&D. And a lot of times they're writing about their D&D campaign, but more than that, they know that their audience is D&D players, and so they are writing in a way that, again, this is how it works for me. Like so much of what I describe in D&D games comes from having reading Weiss and Hickman and reading R.A. Salvatore, and the way that he described because you're going to get the literal thing. It's like, okay, there's a barbarian and a ranger and a wizard fighting a horde of zombies. You're like, well, where could I ever possibly get that from? I'll tell you where you can get it from. You can get it from, it might be like the Sea of Swords or Sea of Storms or something like that. There's literally this awesome description of where the mage from the Sea Sprite is summoning Bigby spells, and he's like flicking zombies' heads off with his Bigby's flicking hand spell. You're not going to get that from Tolkien, okay? But you're going to get it from these novels. Now, are they YA? Are they trash? Maybe. I'm not trying to say like that they're the best novels that were ever written, and I'm sure that there's a lot of them in that genre. But for me, reading and growing up reading D&D novels, okay, and I mean specifically like D&D novels, Gord the Rogue, if you want to read Gary Gygax's stuff, was absolutely critical. Like for example, at last Gen Con. At last Gen Con, I have not actually read this book yet, but Weiss and Hickman There was like a lot of controversy about this because there's a lot of suing going on. But they published a new book called Dragons of Fate. And of course, I was at Gen Con. So how do you not get it signed, by Weiss and Hickman? But I'm promise you, Weiss and Hickman, they're good. They're great. Time of the Twins, fantastic novel. Dragons of Autumn, Twilight, love it. Classic. But, they're not winning the Pulitzer here, But what they are doing is they're writing D&D stories for D&D players, and they themselves are D&D GMs and D&D players. So it's for us, by us, all right, with us. And so I find that I think that is a lot of my, a lot of my skills, if you want to call them that, come from that. And Matthew says, Dragons of Fate is a little weak, but not bad enough that I won't read Dragons of Deceit. My copy is also signed from Gen Con. I thought it was, like I said, I haven't read it yet, but the concept seemed interesting. So, plus, like I said, I mean, for me, it's a dessert. These fantasy novels, they're very easy to read. They're not dense. They're not, it's fun. It's candy. It's like I could go and I could get a nice healthy salad, or sometimes you just get like a pack of sweet tart ropes because they're delicious. So anyways, for me, reading more of these games, I think, is a tremendous way to help you as a GM. It's going to teach you how to communicate D&D weird ass concepts that you won't get anywhere else, and you'll be able to communicate them in the context of your D&D game. And I think that that's super, super important. And again, the last one was actually show and tell, not just show and tell, but, I'm just going to put this here because, we're in that spot. Practice, or at least stop avoiding public speaking. I mean, some of this goes hand in hand. I may have told this story before on stream, but, when I graduated high school, I was, one of the top of my class. And so, me and this other, girl, got to give a speech at graduation. And I remember, it was like the day or two before, or something like that. And we were, going over our speeches or whatever with the vice principal, and Allison was so nervous. And she was like, she's like, how are you not nervous? How are you not nervous? And I told her, I said, Allison, you've known me, since like kindergarten, first grade. I said, we used to play D&D in the library in junior high. You know what I mean? Like we would, we were nerds. And I was like, I've been pretending to be dragons and elven princesses, since I was 10 years old, in front of a group of my peers, talking as myself with like normal words that is already written down. Like, this is a cakewalk, So for me, it's kind of like double-sided. GMing, I think, turned me into a very effective public speaker. And I've always done very well at school or with presentations, and certainly at work. Part of the reason I did so well at my career, we're not where I work now, but where I used to work. I used to present to the entire senior staff, all the way up to the CEO of a $40 billion company over the course of many, many, many hours. And to me, it was like, it's like falling off a log. Easy stuff. Because once you've GM'd, everything else seems easy by comparison. But that being said, I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I think as a GM who's, trying to master your art of communication, when there's an opportunity for you to speak and engage either at a professional level or maybe even just at a family event or any of these things, look for those opportunities, because what gets rewarded gets repeated, and practice makes perfect, and all those other alliterative advice things. What gets measured gets managed. So I think that you have to make this part of your mindset. Now, if it seems a little bit extreme to be thinking about it in this way, I'm not saying that you should like approach your whole life as you trying to be the best game master that you can. And so you're going to like literally go and take these. I'm not saying you shouldn't, by the way, but I do think that it's just part of a community. All the things that I'm talking about here for communication, I think really just apply to a lot of things in life, not just, not just the game mastering, but I do think that it all ties to, into one another. So let's review. Let's go all the way back up here. So we have 6 main skill areas: communication, preparation and organization, improvisation or adaptation, adjudication, mediation, and storytelling or directing. And as I'm actually reading these things, I'm like, okay, communication. Okay, that's the air ring. Okay. Being prepared and organizing. That's definitely the earth ring. Okay. Mediation. Could be void. Storytelling, directing. I actually think that's the fire ring. Remember, fire is creativity and passion. Adjudication, I think, is void. And mediation, finding a commonality between people, probably falls under the water ring. Unfortunately, there's only 5 rings and there's 6 skill areas, but I've been thinking about this the whole stream, by the way. And just how well Legend of the 5 Rings maps to real life principles. Anyways, 6 main skill areas: communication, prep, organization, adaptation, adjudication, mediation, and storytelling, directing. We covered communication today. And thanks to the incredible support of a long list of people, we are going to keep this list going over here over the next couple of weeks. And we'll eventually break through all of these. What is the 6th element? Wood, I think in traditional like Chinese elements. So what are some skills that you can do? What are some key takeaways that you can do just to focus on communication? 1, clear descriptions. Be vivid. You highlight a couple of senses. Be concise. Don't overdo it. Imply next steps. Use that brief moment of communication so that the players understand these are the things that we can interact with. These are the things that we could maybe tap, for more. Would you like to learn more? Click. Yes. Things for them to interact with, things for them to grok with, right? But don't be too clever or coy with your descriptions. Be direct. Don't feel like you need to obfuscate everything and hide everything behind, hidden language. Be direct. It's okay. Players are going to miss it anyways. As a subset, don't describe the monster last. It's just a personal bugaboo. But if there's a gigantic troll screaming at them and charging into them, why am I looking at the strange, intricate design on the far wall? I'm not. There's a big troll in the way. I don't even know if I could see the damn thing because there's a big troll in the way. Listen actively. Understand what your players' intentions are and what they mean. How well do they understand it? Make sure you're on the same page with everybody. When in doubt, ask questions. Not only to make sure that you are, again, understanding their intentions, but also to probe. Make it a two-way street. I'm listening to you. Now you're listening to me. Now I want to listen to you. Give me information. Let me know. Adjust your audience. Now, I'm not trying to say that like one size fits all. Different people communicate differently, and that's to be understood. That's why jamming is tough, especially when you're dealing with strangers, people you don't know. I have a tremendous advantage. I mostly play with the same group of people I played with for a very, very long time. But if you can, try to find a group that is at least somewhat aligned in their with you in some capacity. One of the things that a lot of people have said to me about really enjoying the Knights of Last Call Patreon is we have an exclusive Discord. But if you join Knights of Last Call as a Patreon member, it usually means you have a certain way of approaching and thinking about role-playing games. I'm not saying that we're a monolith. We have a lot of people who disagree with each other, including me. But by and large, you're a person who's interested in taking RPGs more seriously. You're interested in maybe playing a variety of RPGs, of learning from different RPGs. And so that puts you into the mind space where you can kind of understand, okay, we're all here to kind of learn and have fun. And that at least gives you a sort of a level set. Whereas when you go in with like full rando internet stranger, it can be very terrifying. And I will admit, I would be very hesitant to do that because I just don't think I would be able to deliver that well because of not being able to adjust to the audience. So respect for anybody who does do that. Feedback. I recommend as part of communication, asking for some soliciting feedback from your players. I like Smith's option, which is at the end of the session. Again, it could be anonymous. You could go around the table. You could have people write it and think about it and send it back to you. You could incentivize it. You get an extra experience point or not. Don't ask for paragraphs. Just say, what is something you liked about the session? What is something you disliked about the session? And is there something that you would like to see more of, or that you're interested in? Or sometimes you might have a very specific question, like maybe it's more narrative, like when you guys finally reach the capital city, what's the first thing that you're going to do? We could have done that in the session, but sometimes it's nice to have players have a chance to kind of chew on it a little bit, maybe think about it a little bit more without being on the spot. Kind of a little play-by-post moment, if you will. Visual aids, I think, are great and important, even if it's just sketching on a map. I love theater of the mind, but a picture is worth 1,000 words. Don't be afraid to use maps, images, art. I love art. I'm always showing players the monster manuals so they can see the cool art of the cool monster, the cool creature. I love those old modules from back in the day that literally would come with art books. Not for every literal single thing in the dungeon, but like if you look at Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan, it has this fantastic art book. White Plume, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks has this awesome art book. So it's so fun to be able to have these classic images and art, especially if you dig art and artists as much as I do. Which reminds me, I still have to get my Larry Elmore stuff framed. It's still in the tube. Thanks. Now, a little bit harsh, but learn to pronounce words and avoid using a monotone. You need to be dynamic with your range and your tone and your pitch. It's going to come naturally. Raise your voice. If it's exciting, it should feel exciting. If it's not exciting, it's okay to kind of calm things down. But use your voice as an instrument. There's a lot more where human beings communicate on so many different levels, and your energy that you put into your voice, or the lack of energy, is really going to showcase. For me personally, this is a deal breaker. If a GM does not have an exciting tone or pace to their voice, if they're not getting me hyped, I'm going to start to check out. Show and tell when it comes to communicating. Don't shy away from being descriptive and giving cool, fluffy bullshit. But also, don't be afraid to just make it very clear and direct. I am angry. I storm off and I kick the stool and shatter it against the door. Okay, great. I showed, I tell, everybody knows what's going on. Read more. Watch movies, but mostly read more. And I may recommend reading YA, TSR, Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons novels, because to me, that is the most apt one-to-one comparison between what you're trying to do and what would be in a book. And lastly, practice public speaking. Look for opportunities to get more comfortable being in front of a group and sharing your thoughts and your opinions. My personal opinion, I think public speaking is, unless you're literally having to do it without any sort of script, is fantastically easy if you've been GMing for a long time. I mean, especially if you're GMing, the way that I would love for you to GM, which is to say that you're going in there kind of low prep, no prep. You're doing a lot of improvisation. You're spinning a lot of plates in the air. Your players coming up with cool ideas. You're having to adjust on the fly, create new NPCs. They went left when you thought they were going to go right. Now you got to when you go to give a presentation about something that is static and unchanging, and you know it very well, and you already have your bullet points laid out. It's like, come on, that's easy. That's a slam dunk. So that is part one. Communication. And next time we'll probably have a vote to see what we want to do next, but we'll probably do preparation and organization as we kind of go into that. And we'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. As much as I talk about low prep and no prep gaming, I do think prep is really important and awesome. And there's some areas of the game where I'm very well known for saying I actually prefer prep to non-prep. Like, for example, dungeons. I know a lot of people love the sort of random procedural dungeons. I admittedly do not. I like for dungeons to be sort of laid out ahead of time. And I guess it's kind of like, for me, it is like pre-prep, right? But I love the idea of having that dungeon already designed and made up, and it exists, and it's a challenge, and you can use it. The low prep or the no prep part is I don't have a plot. I have this exciting site. I know the information about it. And now what's missing right? It's a can of gasoline. What's missing is the match. It's the players. What are they going to do? I don't need this place to do anything. I just need it to be a powder keg, and I need it to have the potential to be exciting. The players are going to provide that, not me. The players. Anyways, let me see here. Let me make sure I didn't miss any. Got Super Chat, Matty Ice, London Moonlight. We got tips from Albestine, GM Scott. We got support from Shadram as he re-upped his membership for 17 months. Save Versus, Sting, and Dr. Waits all also threw in some support tonight. So thank you, everybody. That is really, really generous and awesome of you, and I really appreciate everybody doing that. And, of course, thank you to all of our patrons for all the incredible work that we do, or that you do. And when I say that, I mean, like, literally. I mean, like, my patrons are sitting there just freaking running games left and right for their fellow patron members, answering questions. Hey, can you run a game on Thursday? Sure. I'll try. I can get out of work early and pick up my daughter from soccer, and I'll rush home so that I can run a game for you guys. Just some of the coolest, chillest, most generous, sweetest people that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting on the internet. And it's been really surprising. Let's see here. I do want to see if there's any direct questions that I can answer before I drop off here. Let's see. Klaus says, do I make notes how to describe stuff to read during the session? Because it's hard for me to find the right words for description in the middle of the game. I recommend, Klaus, bullet points, not paragraphs, right? Hooks, not books, right? Right, patrons? So yeah, Klaus, I think it's okay. I think that's fine. I think there's an in-between. I think there's a learning curve. If you write down 3 bullet points, not long paragraphs or sentences, just enough information for you to know what this means. And I think you'll find that the flittery, glittery details will emerge in time. But if you can get across the basic concepts and ideas and do so in an exciting and interesting way by using your voice, I think you're 80% of the way there. And for God's sake, don't mention a statue in the room if it doesn't mean anything. My players spend 2+ hours trying to figure out why it was there. AD&D back in the 80s. I mean, that could still happen, but I'm also not above saying, like, if the players are really poking at it and they decide to spend amount of time. Again, PBTA handles this really well because you can literally just be like, it's nothing. But I'll also be like, after a few moments of solid investigation, you are completely convinced there's nothing going on about this statue. It's just a statue. Right. I didn't have any prep. There's a room. It's got a statue. It's kind of weird. Wait, what do you mean weird? How's it weird? I don't know. It just looks funny to you. Oh, all right. So what am I? 3 hours later. All right, guys. Well, session's over. Great job, everybody. Let's see here. Not going to lie, the art of the monster is at least 70% of the reason I picked it. I don't know what that means. Maybe I missed something else that they said. Oh, that's an interesting idea, Anon. For locations, I recommend people read tour guides. They're designed to present such information in a compelling way, which begs to be explored. That's a really cool. That's great advice. That's really interesting. And I'm a big Fodors. I have because I've traveled a good number of places around the world, and I've always used Fodor's travel guides. And you're absolutely right. Like that's a great way of getting me excited in a very short way, and it's not being done in like a overly dramatic, hyper stylized way. That's a great advice, Anon. Good job. Thank you, Jackal, for that. London hyping his play-by-post, of course. Yes, remember to click the like button. Easiest way to support the channel. Absolutely. If you can become a patron, I'd love for you to be able to join this community just for your own sake, not just for mine. If you tip and support us, we love you. But honestly, just subscribe, come hang out with us, be part of the conversation. Because I think that's why I built this community, is so that I could talk to people like you, and I can learn from you. You can learn from me. We can all learn from each other. So yeah, absolutely. Sting is come back. Would love to hear in a future stream on prep improv about how to handle your players going in a direction you didn't expect when playing through a VTT. Hard to adjust virtual with walls and lights. The long story short on that, Sting, is sometimes your players are going to just have to accept that not everything is going to be this awesome, fully mapped out digital environment with you having put down the walls to block LOS and lighting effects and particle effects. Sometimes you're going to create a new scene in Foundry. You're going to hop over to it. You're going to use the free draw tool. You're going to just draw a couple squares, and you're going to maybe use a couple lines and some squiggles to represent the bush. And then you're going to drag their tokens onto that scene. And you're going to say, look, this is a representation of what's going on. I know it doesn't look as cool as the other thing else, but this is what RPGs are about. If you want that freedom to explore, then you need to be willing that not everything's going to be perfect, for sure. And in fact, but Sting, let me be very clear. I understand your pain, because for me, having that thing available, that really beautiful map with all the maps, the walls and the lighting, is a very cool thing to have. There's no doubt about it. Even if I do feel like it might take you out of it a little bit sometimes, but it also makes me as a GM very loath, because I'm like, I don't want my players to go from this 5-star experience to this shithole experience. It's like their expectations can be very, very shattered that way. But this is also why I struggle with VTTs. So this is true. Now, that being said, that's a good tip of advice too, Anime's Mom. Just, having a bunch of maps in your back pocket that you can load up in case they go somewhere. Especially like generic maps, just like, this is a map of it's like a generic rocky background. This is a generic forest map. This is a generic plains map, that kind of stuff. And also, this is good. It's not really communication advice. It's just more like game management advice. GM Scott is absolutely right. You're not a fucking computer. There is nothing wrong. My players, it's like an inside joke, right? Where it's like, you used to play like EverQuest or, old games, and you would, go to a new zone, right? And it would, the action would freeze, and there'd be like a message, right? Loading, please wait. This is a thing that video games used to do. I don't know if they still do this anymore, but people will joke that about like how much processing. We did something completely unexpected and fucked up, and I'll be like, all right, fellas, take 10. I'm going to need a couple minutes to figure this one out. And the players it's almost like a badge of honor, right? They're kind of like, yeah, and it also kind of highlights to them. They're like, okay, we are doing something that is unique. We are taking this thing off the rails. We are going in a direction that he did not expect, but the game continues. Boy, this thing is real. This thing does have legs. This thing is really, really awesome. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, fellas, that's all. I need some time. I also don't think there's anything wrong, by the way. These are evolving things. Unless you're being paid or something by your players. If you normally play till 11 o'clock and it's like 10:15 and the players take an extreme hard left, you say, sorry, ladies, this is awesome. And I think we should totally go this way. And I'm excited to see what happens, but I have none of that planned. So why don't we just call it early? Okay, we'll call it early, and that'll give me an extra week or 2 weeks or whatever until we play again, and I can be a little bit more prepared. And then next time we'll start off right there, and I'll have a little bit more to go off of. Okay, but I think that's awesome, and I want to support you. I do not want to railroad you back onto the path that you're supposed to be taking just because it's convenient and it's written down. I want to respect your choices, but you got to give me some rope to work with here. And if that means taking a 10-minute break, or if that means calling the session a little bit early. Maybe it's because I mostly play with guys in their late 30s and early 40s, but when if I call a session, 20, 30, 40 minutes early, nobody's bitching. Everybody's like, all right, that's okay. Also, Jepeku creates some of the prettiest, awesomest maps forever, and the quality of them is almost not to be believed. So if you buy one of those, or there's another one that I have where it was like $65 and you got like hundreds of maps. So if anything, the problem is going to be remembering where they all are and organizing them. And I have Dyson Logos is like 50% of like games that I have run at a convention, like a one shot, have been run on Dyson Logos maps. And Seafoot is exactly who I was thinking of, Shadram. I was thinking of Seafoot. Seafoot Games has a great bundle, great package, and I've used a lot of their stuff from VTTs. Really good maps, pretty stuff. But I do love Dyson Logos. All right, well, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and supporting us. Thank you for hanging out. How do we do tonight? Looks like we got over 100. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Happy to see so many people engage with this. And again, we're not here to create the 10-minute content. Maybe someday, maybe there's a world where Derek can just tell you one thing and tell it to you in a YouTube algorithm appropriate amount of time. But until that day comes, it's going to be 2.5 hour streams, including pre-streams, where we kind of, make it through one of 6 of GM skill blocks. So, but thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a great weekend. And I look forward to seeing you on the Patreon if you're not already there. Otherwise, we'll be talking, we'll be hanging out. And if not, I'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Good night, everybody.